Well, I am very excited and somewhat sad that this is our last class. I am excited because we are going to do a little different format today and focus a lot more on discussion, because this is such an interesting and somewhat controversial area. And I'm still cutting in and out. Oh, this is horrible. We may just have to, I'm not sure. I'm at a loss. I'm at the office, so any kind of internet issues are totally outside of my control. Is the video going in and out, or just the sound?
The sound.
The sound, both. This is so strange. We are having this.
Maybe it's the rain.
Yeah, well, it rained earlier, and I'm just not sure. Well, we may have to plunge forward. Fortunately, the first part of the class will be the group presentations, as I mentioned in the announcement. So we will get started with those, and hopefully my internet connection will not impact those. So we'll do that, and then we will have some, I have some discussion questions I wanted to pose to you all, and then we'll be able to do, if we have any time, just a kind of a mini course wrap up if there's any, questions about anything. But I really wanted to make sure, because this is such an interesting topic, that, everybody had a chance to kind of, dig in a little deeper. So, okay, so we will just move forward with our group presentations. And so who we have on tap is Danielle, Victoria, Harley, Bridget, and how do you say your name? Jasuan. Are you in that group too? I don't know how to pronounce your name. I don't want to butcher it. Okay. Well, the first group can just go ahead and go. Okay. Well, this may just be a problem this evening. I apologize. Can we just see if we can go ahead and get the first group to go? Let me check. We may just do this by chat. We'll see what happens. Can we go ahead and see if the first group can go?
I don't know if this is in any particular order, but my group did mention that we wanted to go first, if that's okay with everyone.
Oh, sure. Which group? Will you tell me your names and which group you are?
And if I'm not responding to what you're saying, it's just because it's frozen.
Oh gosh, and I'm sure it's a horrible picture, so apologies for that. Sure, go ahead and go.
Okay. Awesome. So in my group, it's me, Katie, and then we have Valerie, Alicia, Candace, and then we have another group member named Callie, and she is not able to join us tonight because of a work conflict, but she sent along some discussion questions I'm going to read at the end for us to talk about. So basically for this unit, my group thought that kind of the really important thing to lay the foundation is some of that core vocabulary and understanding those terms really of sex and gender. We had a really good discussion about these things, and I'll kind of remind you guys of that gingerbread man that was on one of the slideshows. Do you guys remember the whole gingerbread man guy. We thought that was a really cool way to remember some of the really key terms of the vocabulary. And I'll just kind of, since you probably don't have it in front of you, I'll just kind of refresh what the gingerbread man looked like. So you had the gingerbread man, and he had you could see his brain, and that pointed to identity and talking about gender identity. And then he had, I guess, gingerbread man private parts with an arrow pointing to, it had the word sex. And then on the outside of the gingerbread man, there was kind of a dashed line, and it said expression. So basically the key thing to remember is the difference between sex and gender, and this understanding that they're not the same, and sex is kind of that your biological sex. So physiologically, like what makes you a man or a woman, or maybe intersex. If you guys remember the Australian documentary, we talked about several individuals that were not so neatly just a man or a woman, and this idea that it can exist on a spectrum. So that's kind of the important distinction. And then gender is kind of this understanding of being masculine or feminine, and your gender identity is your perception of that. So in the gingerbread man, the reason that the brain has a little arrow that says identity is because it's the person's own perception of that. And let's see, not lastly, but next, we wanted to touch on this idea of sexual orientation. And I was trying to think of a way to like really simplify it, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's basically who you're attracted to. And again, it's kind of like this idea of it falling on a spectrum, not being maybe just men or women or somewhere in the middle. And then lastly, the concept of a gender role. And I think that's really important for this CTE. So basically, gender role, or probably all familiar with this, but a gender role is basically the larger culture, the larger society, like expectation of what a person of that gender is going to be like, attributes about that person. And I'm sure we can all think of examples of what society might say the gender role of a man or a woman is. But anyways, I feel like I talked for a very long time, so I'm going to hand it over to Valerie, who's going to talk to us about more of the kind of biological mechanisms that have to do with sex. So what makes a person a man or a woman.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. So I'm going to define sex, testosterone, estrogen, and oxytocin. And sex is defined as either two categories, male or female, in which humans and other living things are divided into based off their biological makeup or their reproductive functions. And testosterone is a major hormone that is produced mainly in males' testes, which stimulates the development of male sex organs, sexual traits, and sperm. Testosterone is also found in the ovaries. Estrogen is a hormone that promotes the development and maintenance of female characteristics of the body. And oxytocin is a hormone that is released by the pituitary gland that causes increased contraction of the uterus during labor and stimulates the ejection of milk into the ducts of the breast. So I was basically just describing things that go with the two sexes and how it, I guess, like works in our body or our development. And after me would be Alicia, and she'll be discussing the childhood sexual development.
Okay, so you are all set to go, right, Valerie? Okay. So I was gonna help tie in the CT, so hopefully everybody remembers our little 3-year-old Tim. And he loves to dress up in his mom's clothes and play with dolls. And his dad is worried that if he does grow up and he identifies, as a gay man, that he's gonna have a really tough life. So I just wanted to bring that up to kind of remind you guys of what our CTE is. So I'm going to do the brief makeup of childhood, like sexual identity and play and things of that nature without really getting into it too much. So For early childhood ages from 2 to 6, we're kind of exploring our genital areas, seeing what's down there, what's going on, and all of that. And so we have social play that starts at age 2, and it really peaks in 3 to 5. And now we're wondering what's going on in our friends and the people that we're interacting with. So what do they got going on? And kind of figuring out, oh, I'm a boy, she's a girl, all of that jazz. So then that kind of goes into gender identity. So between the ages of 1 and 2, children are kind of conscious of their physical differences between the sexes. At age 3, they recognize if they are a boy or a girl. And at age 4, they are very stable in understanding that I am a boy, I am a girl. So then we move on to our school age years, so from ages 7 to 11. And then kiddos are starting to realize that sex play is something that parents or adults are going to react to, so we start to hide those sexual exploration, those sexual types of play. One example I could think of is Barbies. So a lot of girls that age are interested in Barbies, and then that's kind of where that's going to happen. And at age 9, we're looking into kind of making those games show things that I'm thinking about when it comes to sex. Now I'm sharing with my same-sex friends and kind of doing that. So then we're getting into the really awesome part, puberty. I'm sure you all enjoyed that fun phase. So that's starting at 11, moving up. So for girls, we have the budding breasts from 8 to 13, growth of pubic hair, first period, all of our favorite parts. So puberty and moving upward. For boys, we're looking at the growth of the scrotum and testes, pubic hair as well, change in body shape, all of that fun stuff is going on. So as far in regards to sexual behavior and how we're developing, due to changes in the brain and the body, we have more of a sexual desire. We might not understand that yet, but we're getting older and we're figuring that out. And we start to have our first sexual attractions by age 10. Masturbation starts to become part of the question. Am I into that? Am I not into that? What does that mean? What does that look like? Trying to figure that out. Games like Spin the Bottle enhance. So now we're not only looking at sexual play with our same-sex friends, but what that looks like across sexes. So games like Spin the Bottle start to exist. We start to develop sexual confidence in ourselves. So kind of comparing ourselves to others by how our body is developing and what society is telling us it should look like. And then sexual activity is pretty much the end game of sex. So the older you get, the more you learn about sex and if you want it or if you don't. So those are kind of the basics and the very, very quick, rapid development through sexual play and learning sexual experiences. And then I'm going to pass it over to Candace, who is going to talk about the importance of being supportive. As I kind of described those normal stages of development and being supportive with atypical behaviors versus normal behaviors and kind of wrapping that all up for us. So hand it over to you, Candace.
Thanks. Yeah, and so as we talked about that I was going to do is just, what as a social worker I might say to the family. So I think, as my group's already pointed out, first I would like to point out to the parents in the CTE that A, it's normal for a kid that age to be doing those behaviors, but B, he's really playing around with his gender expression, which is different than his sexual orientation. But then continue further in the conversation with them. And I think the most important part is, however, if your son does happen to be homosexual or bisexual or transgender or anything that, is just not, heterosexual, that their support is very important. There are a lot of negative outcomes associated with homosexual or LGBTQ youth, but that we have to also take into consideration that a lot of those youth, their family cut them off or just not supportive or just disapproving in general. And that has an effect. I think one of the slides said that if they did not have family support, they were 8 times more likely to try to commit suicide. So while they may have very limited impact on their child's sexuality or gender identity, they will have a huge impact on whether or not they are the gating factor in that, or a compounding factor, I would say, in the negative outcomes that they're concerned about. And then I think I want to pass it back to Katie, who's going to read some of the questions that were sent by our other partner.
Yes, so Callie was our other group member, and these are the questions that she sent along. She asked if anyone could think of an example, either in like an internship, job, or any kind of, I guess, life experience she would include in this too, where a parent's maybe religious beliefs impacted, where a parent's religious beliefs impacted the parent's stance on what toys a child could play with. So I think in the CTE, you talk about Tim, who loves to play dress up, and he likes to play with girl toys. So I guess how you guys either would react if a parent was coming at it with maybe a religious objection, if anyone has any experience in this with maybe a job, if anyone feels comfortable sharing. It's a tough question.
I have one, and it's not about being religious, but it's more like about cultural. I'm Hispanic, and I have a friend when he was younger, probably 3-4 years old, and he used to play with Barbie dolls. And one time when his father got home, he saw correct, playing with girly toys. I don't know if you got that.
Yeah, if you could maybe repeat that again. It froze, so I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't get what you said. My daughter here with me, and she wants to talk to me right now. But what were you saying?
We were just saying that a lot of us had a hard time hearing you because it froze. So if you don't mind, maybe saying it briefly again, or maybe typing it, whatever you want to do.
What I'm saying is not about being religious, but it's more like a cultural thing. I'm Hispanic, and for us, growing up, boys should be boys and girls should be girls. If you see a boy playing with Barbie dolls or with toys that are not like manly, that's something that will upset parents. And I have a friend that when he was younger, his dad caught him playing with Barbie dolls. I mean, he wasn't doing anything. He was just playing. He was very young. But for his dad, that was something so bad that I think he beat him like horrible. That I remember when he was telling us the story, he's like, I never again attempt to play with a female doll or like a Barbie doll or anything like that, not even with his cousin, because that's what happened. He was playing with his cousin, and I think that's normal, especially when you're young. So I don't know if that contributes to your to the things you were saying.
Yeah, I think it definitely does. It's hard to balance like being culturally, like staying culturally competent and like understanding that part of the culture, but like also knowing that it's what we've read and what we learned, that it's normal for a boy to, do that. So yeah, thank you.
And I just think it speaks on how what an impact parents' responses can have to children's like behavior. I mean, the fact that your friend A remembered it, but then B like shared it and seemed to recall it very well.
Does anybody else have something they'd like to add? And if not, we are finished.
I have one thing to add. I just think that the part about the parents not knowing that it's like a normal thing, like contributes to their negative reaction to it, because like she says like a cultural thing, and I know like in the African American community, it's like not really a welcoming thing to be homosexual or anything like that. So as a kid, like your parents do see you playing with a toy or something of the different sex, then it is a negative thing. But like just being uneducated and not knowing that it's normal and doesn't like technically like decide whether they'll go down that route could like play a big part in it.
Can y'all see me now? Can y'all hear me? Am I still frozen?
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, hi, I'm Tori, and I guess that will go next. I was going to talk about gender vocabulary, but that's already been covered. So I'm just going to kind of give like a brief story before we go into it. My group is going to talk more about masculinity and femininity. I don't know if that's how you say it. But growing up, I was considered a tomboy, and so I didn't play with dolls. I didn't do the whole playing house or stuff like that. I went hunting. I worked outside. Anything a boy did, that's what I did. And I guess in my hometown, I'm from Tellico Plains, that was normal. Majority of girls, that's how we grew up. None of us really grew up girly, unless you were my mom. So she was really the only one that ever didn't enjoy that I was a tomboy. So I guess reading about this, I learned a lot about myself, people considering me being masculine because I was the sports person, the hunting person. And so I guess I just wanted to touch on that I learned a lot about myself while going over these readings, because I never thought about it. I thought it's normal here in Tellico Plains. That's just what you do. You grow up a tomboy. That's just how life works. So I'm going to pass it on to Bridget, and she's going to explain how society describes masculinity and femininity in boys and girls.
All right, can y'all hear me? Okay, great. So I have the similar situation. I grew up in a small town, so it was that was normal. But going to school in a bigger city and stuff, I found that that's not really the norm. I mean, it's not. It's okay in different places for little boys to play with girly toys, I guess. But it's still not very much accepted. Especially, I think it's much more accepted for girls to play with boy toys or be tomboyish and go hunting. In one of the readings, it stated that sex typing starts at a very early age, as in toy activities and stuff like that. And just like in our CTE, the little boy's dad was upset. He was worried. He thought that he was going to get made fun of or have a hard childhood because he was playing with a doll. So it is a concern. And that's because of how society reacts to that, and how they are labeled. It can even affect, another rating stated, it can affect the way parents and children have a relationship, how friends have relationships, you know, if what they're doing is accepted by the child's parents or other people at school and stuff like that. So I think that if it's out of the cultural norm or not what you're used to, or people in the society, if it's not, you know, accepted, then they're going to be treated differently. They're going to be treated much worse. They're going to, you know, be shamed for that. And that's just how, you know, the sex typing, that's what happens when it's out of the norm. And I know that the other group member is going to follow up a little bit with that. So,
like, boys would play with little cars, Legos, and girls with stuffed animals, etc. There is a stereotype where boys have to be masculine and strong, whereas girls are expected to be feminine and delicate. Nevertheless, many children at this age tend to explore their environment, and their influence can potentially somehow determine how the child is going to develop their gender identity. For example, a girl can play with a car, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But if the boys start playing with a little Barbie doll, then we have an issue with it. And even if you go to the store, to the toy section, you can see Legos for girls, little pin cards and all that, but you don't see the same treatment for boys. And again, I have my daughter behind me because she thinks this is very exciting. So going back to this, society really, society, it's teaching kids since a very young age that you're a man and you're a girl. I'm sorry, it's just like hard to concentrate and all. And also when in the case of Tim, his dad already at 3-year-old, he was concerned about his behavior. He wasn't doing anything wrong. My baby girl, she's 5 and she plays with trucks and all that. And I think it's okay. That's part of growing up and finding what she likes or not. And I think we have so much pressure to teach our children, this is good or this is right. And if you do it this way, you're wrong, and start putting labels. That's the way I see it. And that's how, you know, I wanted to address it. The social expectations about how a boy or a girl have to behave is so high that when a little child like Tim plays with a Barbie doll, his dad is already concerned. We cannot label that he's going to be homosexual. That's just a phase. He can grow out of it, or he can either change that. The same way with a girl. You know, I think also gender role expectation as a child born male are different from a child who is born a female. In this society, it is easier to let a girl to play with boy toys and have less repercussions than a boy playing with girly toys. I can pass this to my next classmate. I don't know, where is she? If you have something else to add.
Hi, that's me. So I'm Harley. I'm going to be talking about the CTE from this week. And I know a lot of this has already been kind of discussed and mentioned earlier, but something that I really took away from it was when Jack was first talking about how he wasn't homophobic, even though his son was dressing up in his mom's clothes, and how he wasn't homophobic, but he didn't want his son to be gay. And I think that kind of speaks volumes for kind of the social climate we have, and how we don't really understand the differences necessarily of sex and gender, and how easily they're confused. And it's really concerning to me because we so frequently confuse the two. So like, for instance, when we talk about LGBT, the T doesn't really belong there, the T being transgender. So we're confusing gender identity with sexuality right from the beginning when we're talking about the LGBTQ community. And so that's kind of one of the first things that I took out of it, was that confusion. And I really do think that it's easily confused, and societally, there are expectations, as my group has already mentioned. And to be honest, I kind of empathize with Jack, even though it's pretty problematic to not let your child express themselves in the way that they feel and the way that they desire. But it's scary. You want the best for your kids. You don't want them to get hurt or bullied or have a lot of hate crimes against them, or live in a social climate which is really, really hostile towards queer folks. So I kind of sympathized with Jack in that regard. But I do think it's important to note, and that's one of the main things I took out of it, was the misunderstanding of sex and gender, and how frequently we talk about LGBT when the T doesn't belong there. And that's, I'm not transphobic, but what I mean is T is a gender identity, or is gender or sex, whereas LGB is talking specifically about sexuality. So that's pretty much what I really I took away from this CT, other than what's already been mentioned before. And I know Danielle is going to wrap up, and I'll forward it on to Danielle.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me? Okay, sorry. So upon talking about that, we found that it's looked down upon for girls to be more aggressive, and then for guys to be empathetic. And so why do you feel that society looks down on that? And how would our society look different if we change those designed roles?
Well, I wonder how it may make, like how it would affect households and like child rearing. I wonder if, just off the top of my head, if it would affect like domestic violence rates, if men felt like they could, you know, like openly express their emotions and grow up learning to deal with them in healthier ways. I also wonder about like household, if couples, many more couples, some households, and I see it a lot in like clients' households, and yeah, it does go back to that, you know, trying to be culturally competent and like culturally sensitive. That's their culture, you know, not pushing what I think should happen. But, you know, there's some men who just don't take part really in direct child care, like task or household. Or there's, you know, some women that are not going to like be breadwinners. But that kind of puts a lot of maybe unnecessary stress on the partner at different times, you know, like maybe when all the children are in diapers, that would be a very hard time. Or, you know, if we go through another recession, it might be really hard on like the man. So.
Yeah, I really like how you brought up about the whole domestic violence and how that could, you know, help with that maybe. And then I see where somebody said it could create better father-child relationships. I think that would help a whole lot with like the fathers being there for their children and that. Anybody else? Okay. Well, that is all that we have for you guys. If oh.
Can you all hear me? Am I still frozen?
If it's okay with our group, we'll go ahead and go.
Yes.
Okay. So we actually made a PowerPoint, so I'm going to share my screen with you guys. And just a second. Okay. So yeah, so we just made a PowerPoint to kind of make things run a little more smoothly. And and I think Tori is going to start us off.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
There.
Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and start off with the introduction. So basically talking about some vocabulary that pretty much all the other groups have talked about. And everybody's been doing an awesome job. So I think it's really great to hear everyone's ideas and everyone's opinions and stuff. But first off, we're talking about the vocabulary. Sex is, their biology based on their reproductive organs and your hormones, whereas gender is how somebody identifies and how they present themselves to the world. And then also sexual orientation is who they're attracted to, which is also very important. And then we have someone in our group talking about homophobia and discrimination and prejudice. And then at the end, I'll be having the class discussion and the questions. All righty. So who's ever next can go ahead.
So Hannah wasn't able to be here this evening, so I offered to read her slide for her. Some of the expectations and stereotypes that we have talked about already, that by age 2, most kids are aware of their own gender. By 3 or 4, they're aware of, kind of what's expected. And their children start to be socialized and sex typed when parents encourage sex typed activities. And, those activities are all built around what we consider to be social norms. Some of the other groups talked about, in her town, it's a norm for girls to do everything a boy does. In other towns, it's not the social norm. And so that individual culture can also play a role. And sometimes when those social norms do not line up with what the child experiences or what the child expresses, it can lead to gender atypical children being diagnosed with gender disorders. I'm not sure who's after me. Yep, there we go. The scenario.
Hi. Okay, so this is Alora. And so we just have the scenario put up here, which is our CTE. And I know that people have kind of went over it before. And so we have our friends Sarah and Jack. They have a 3-year-old boy, Tim. And the father and mother are both worried about Tim's future because he likes playing with girls, like dolls, and dressing up in his mom's clothes. And then Shelby, thank you. And so I looked into what role genes play in gender identity. And I'm interested to know if any of you read this differently, because after my reading, this is the answer that I came up with, that the XX and XY chromosome pairing has a lot of influence into behavior due to hormones and development. So if a baby becomes male, XY, then this tells the body to develop testes, which then produce testosterone, which then influence masculine traits. And then one common theme that was in a lot of our reading is that girls exposed to elevated levels of testosterone in utero develop more masculine traits as well. So things such as gender identity, sexual preferences, and then the childhood gender typicality all have a chance to be more akin to the preferences shown in a girl's male counterpart if that elevated level of testosterone is present in utero. And so that can have a influence on a girl's sexuality being more masculine or gender identity. And then a male's homosexuality may involve an X chromosome linked to maternal inheritance. Not always, just in some of our reading that was suggested that a portion of males who identify as homosexual have a mother that has an X chromosome. I can't remember the word, like I'm going to say muted for lack of the correct word. So beyond these genetic traits, unless there's additive genetic factors which is like the testosterone. That would be an additive genetic factors. The next influence is the environment, which Shelby is going to talk about next.
Yes, so we've talked a lot about the environmental influences already, and people have kind of gone over this. So previously, the sex-typical play, the gendered play of young kids was thought to result from environmental factors, but according to the Hines article, scientists are really reevaluating that. So I know some people already talked about how sort of around age 3, which is how old Tim happens to be in this scenario, that's when a child starts to kind of understand the differences between boys and girls. So Tim's probably just kind of figuring out, oh, I'm a boy, and oh, she's a girl, or whatever. And children tend to play with gender expression and rules, so that's totally normal for him to want to play with his mom's clothes, because he's just kind of figuring out, oh, I'm a boy and she's a girl and mom's a girl. And so just I think as a social worker, we would just kind of want to explain that that's a normal thing, and that, socialization factors do gain importance sort of as parents introduce different toys, or peers do certain things, or teachers encourage, gender typed play. But overall, the other article that's cited here showed that the study that they did really showed that the environment didn't really have much of an effect as far as who children grew up to be attracted to sexually. So, so to answer Jack's question, there's really not a whole lot of things that he could do to prevent Tim from growing up to be homosexual if that's what he chooses to do. So what we do know about sex, gender, and sexual orientation is that it's really multidimensional. We also know that everyone sort of has a little bit of a personal bias, whether it's implicit or an explicit bias. So even Jack's worries about Tim's future, if he does become gay, are kind of based on his perceptions of what it's like for someone to be gay, and how that could be stressful. And I know a lot of people have kind of talked about, it is a community that's discriminated against a lot. So he does have some legitimate fears about that. But we also know that homophobia and transphobia equals a lot of toxic stress for those populations, and it really affects all of their lives. And as we know from our previous unit, toxic stress equals poor outcomes for that community. So just a higher likelihood of physical and mental illness, and just poor outcomes overall. So the best thing that he could do is to just kind of let that play out, however it's going to play out, and be supportive either way. So just offering some education to the parents about that, and I think that would be helpful. So I'm going to take it back to ELLYN to, I think that's who's next, to give us some real life examples.
All right, so I want to first introduce you to the Mr. Gender Unicorn, or Miss, or the Gender Unicorn. Okay, because one of the things that we're learning is that, sexuality and sexual orientation and gender identity, all of this exists on a continuum. And the longer we go on and the more that we learn, some people have argued that the less that those LGBTQA, all 14 letters apply, and that maybe we should start switching to this kind of continuum model, where it doesn't really define those. And to kind of illustrate that point, and, in relation to our CTE, I want to tell you a very short story about 3 little boys and 1 little girl, all who grew up to be men. And so in this CTE, we have 1 little boy who is 3 years old and playing with dolls of him in dresses. Okay. That was what he enjoyed playing with. He enjoyed styling himself because his mom was his primary caregiver. He was mimicking her, and that's what he knew to do, and his dad was working in a factory most of the time. And he grew up and was heterosexual, is happily married, has children, but when he was 2 to 6, playing female toys. And then I have, from the time that he came out of the womb his parents enjoyed participating in all boys stuff. Like everything all the time, trucks, dirt, fighting, all of it, everything would associate with boy and masculinity. He grew up to be a very masculine man, but he's also gay. He is homosexual, identifies that way, and that is what feels best to him. Now I have another friend, okay? He grew up to be a drag queen, but when he was little, he played with girls' toys, he dressed up, he would dress his sisters up, and he also went to a very black and white type of church. And at home, he was told not. You know, he grew up. It's because for him, expression as a drag queen is not sexually related at all. His drag, how he expresses femininity, is purely a creative outlet. It is not linked to his sexual orientation or his gender identity. So it's just one of those interesting, everything exists on a continuum. And then finally, you know, there was this little girl who was born to a family, and fortunately they never really forced her to do things she wasn't comfortable with. At the age of 6, she was more comfortable with masculine things, wearing masculine clothes, and she decided that she was a boy. She kept that to herself throughout high school and even throughout most of college until she transitioned and became a man. And, you know, in 2 of these cases, so we have 2 guys that played with girl stuff. One grew up to be gay, one grew up to be homosexual. You got 2 people that did not play with girl stuff. One grew up to be gay, one eventually ended up identifying as transgender, you know, so hopefully the message that you get is that everything exists on a continuum. So I'm going to turn it back over to Tori to wrap it up for us.
Okay, so to end all these awesome presentations, so we want to know what your view on how the parents see Tim's actions, and also how would you handle it as a social worker. And then we also want to know y'all's experiences and how would you handle this situation if it was your own child. Don't everyone jump at once now.
Can you repeat the question?
Curious to how you
I think using the diagrams, the gingerbread and the unicorn are simple ways to show a parent the fluidity of, you know, okay, that just because they play with toys is not, or because the male child plays with Barbie dolls is not an exact, you know, precursor for being a doll. You know, it's the gingerbread. We call them gingerbread men, but they could be gingerbread women. That's just what we call them, I guess, because they don't have on skirts. So I think it's a to go through those different developmental ages, you know, of exploration and self-expression to help the parents understand. You said, what would I do as a parent?
Yes.
As a parent, I would allow my child to do whatever they wanted. I would, you know, allow my child to have that expression, and I would play with nation and play. So I would rather my child and explore, have as open and child appropriate conversations as I could.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that great response. Anybody else? Okay, I think that about wraps this up, but thank you so much, everybody.
Okay. Can you all hear me at all? Yes, you can hear me? Okay. I have dropped off of this call and somehow been looped back in probably like 8 or 10 times now. So it's entirely possible that as I'm talking, I will jump off. If it gets too bad, I'll just go ahead and close up shop and perhaps kind of record an additional sort of discussion lecture, which I'm not happy about. This is like one of my favorite units, and so I'm sorry that we've had so many technological issues. So a couple of responses that I had to, oh, you can't hear me anymore now? Wah, wah. Can you hear me? No. Okay. So sad. Oh God. Okay. Okay, can you hear me now? No, can you hear me? No. Yes. Yes, I will do that. So, oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, I am ending the meeting now, and I will send a follow-up. Okay. Bye, everybody. Everyone. So sorry about this stupid thing.